Today, we proudly open a new chapter in our history as we inaugurate the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao.
Today marks a history for us. We are starting a new kind of jihad, a jihad against poverty, against want, and against neglect. We have been guided in our armed struggle by the tenets of Islam. We will also be guided by the teachings of Islam in delivering the trust that was been given to us to run the Bangsamoro government through the brand of leadership Islam advocates, that is moral governance.
As we enter the transition period, I ask everyone to work towards building lasting peace and inclusive progress that will benefit all Mindanaoans and the entire country as well.
What is in transition now is not just BTA. Both national government and the BARMM are actually in transition.
To my dear Bangsamoro sisters and brothers, in the BTA, the power to chart the course of your region's future is now in your hands.
It's the last Friday of October and about 60 days before the end of the year, before 2021. Welcome to Reporting Mindanao, and in today's online forum entitled Bangsamoro in Transition, we will look at the midterm review on the legal and political track of the Mindanao Peoples Caucus. This is the first episode of our series, Bangsamoro in Transition, and we are on Facebook, YouTube, and later on we will be aired, or you can listen to us at Mindano's podcast. My name is Ami Cabusao, and I am here with Rob Gumba and Yas Ocampo, who will help us do all the technical work for this session. We call on Carol Arguillas, the editor-in-chief of Mindano's, to tell us more about this series. So, Carol?
Welcome to Reporting Mindanao, an online forum initiated by Mindano's to discuss various issues concerning Mindanao and to provide journalists with a venue to enhance their coverage and understanding of these issues. For the Bangsamoro in Transition series, we deem it important to start with a review of what has been done in the first half of the 3-year transition period that, by law, will end on June 30, 2022. What has the transition government accomplished under Republic Act 11054, the enabling law of the 2014 Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro? What has it failed to do and why? The same questions are to be asked of the national government, which has also obligations to fulfill under RA 11054. Under normal circumstances, a post-conflict government in transition faces many challenges. Transitioning in the midst of a global pandemic is even more challenging as it has to attend to the equally urgent task of responding to COVID-19 in the Bangsamoro region. This episode has 2 parts. Session 1 today on the legal political track, and Session 2 on the normalization track on Tuesday, November 3. The Mindanao Peoples Caucus, a peace advocacy group that has been helping in the Bangsamoro peace processes for nearly 2 decades now, spearheaded a rapid midterm review on the Bangsamoro transition period as part of its continuing advocacy to monitor and help ensure the successful implementation of the peace agreement and RA 11054. We have invited members of the review team to share with us their findings and recommendations. Again, thank you for joining this forum. Welcome to Reporting Mindanao and welcome to our first episode of the Bangsamoro in Transition series. Thank you.
Let me introduce to you our presenters for this session. We have Attorney Hanan Romando Kahalan, who is a CPA lawyer and who specializes in corporate investments and taxation laws. She is currently a practicing lawyer engaged in litigation, corporate advisory, and advocacy. We have Attorney Mary Ann Arnado, who earned her degree in International Relations from the King Faisal Center for International Islamic and Arabic Studies of the Mindanao State University in Marawi City, and her Juris Doctor at the Ateneo de Davao University. She is currently the Secretary General of the Mindanao Peoples Caucus and convener of the Asian Network on Countering Violent Extremism. She is a law practitioner specializing on indigenous peoples and land rights, feminist legal advocacy, and defense of human rights defenders. Amelita Melot Balisila Atilio is a social science practitioner with more than 35 years of experience in social development work, project monitoring, and evaluation. She is a researcher writer, a mentor, coach, trainer, facilitator on monitoring, assessment, and evaluation and development, and a gender specialist. She has served as consultant for numerous organizations, most notably the World Bank and the United Nations. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Mayong buntag. Okay, halfway in the transition period, where is the BARMM now? Has the Bangsamoro Transition Authority able to carry out its mandate and successfully implement the letter and spirit of the Bangsamoro Organic Law? More importantly, has it been able to preserve the gains of the peace process? Have the promised peace dividends felt already by the Bangsamoro people? It is our hope that this rapid midterm review provides a great opportunity for the BTA and the peace stakeholders to pause and revisit the accomplishments, discuss problems, make the necessary adjustments, and come with viable solutions to improve and fast-track the implementation of the transition. This is the flow of our presentation. We have the overview, the key accomplishments, the gaps and challenges. Then we will have voices from the ground, and last would be our recommendations. Next slide, please. The midterm review has three objectives. First, to determine the midterm status of the priorities set to be accomplished by the BTA. Second, to identify the gaps, key challenges, and problems encountered by the BTA and the various BARMM agencies in the implementation of the mandated priorities to be implemented during the transition period. And third, to propose doable actions and recommendations to accomplish the remaining targeted priorities. As mentioned earlier, this midterm review has two major parts: the political legal track, which is our main topic today, and the normalization track. For the methodology, we did records review. The data were generated through records review. We read the draft codes the accomplishment reports, news articles, photographs, and other available documents and materials. Then we also did key informant interviews with 30 key personalities through face-to-face and virtual interviews between the months of August and September. Most of them are members of the parliament and the government of the day. And we did also focus group discussions, 21 focus group discussions involving 232 individuals across the BARMM provinces. The scope and parameters of the review. The basis of this rapid midterm review is the Bangsamoro Organic Law. In Article 16, it provides the functions and priorities during the transition period. Hence, the review specifically looked into the status of these functions and priorities of the BTA. Please allow me to enumerate the enactment of priority legislation such as the Admin Code, Revenue Code, Electoral Code, Local Government Code, and Education and Civil Service Code. The enactment of the IP law, the organization of the bureaucracy, transfer of powers and properties of the ARMM to BARMM, disposition of personnel of the ARM, transition from ARM to the Bangsamoro government, other matters that may be necessary for the protection and welfare of the constituents. And we look into section 6, next slide. So part of the scope and parameters of the review, we looked into section 6, which is the transition plan, section 7, the interim officer, section 8, interim cabinet, section 9, interim bureaucracy, section 10, the setting up of an independent merit-based, hindi ko makita, merit-based and credible placement and hiring process of all offices, agencies, and institutions in the Bangsamoro government and shall consider gender and ethnic balance. Then section 11, which is the disposition of personnel and assets of national government and agencies. We also looked into the Article 6, which is intergovernmental relations, Article 12 on fiscal autonomy clause, particularly on the block grant, special development fund, and other sources of revenue required to finance the transition. As to the timeline of the transition, we understand it is from January 25, 2019 until June 30, 2022, which is 1,265 days. As of October 7, that was 622nd day of the period of transition, with 643 days remaining and 12 months to go before the filing of candidacy of the synchronized elections, including the first elections of the members of the parliament. And part of this midterm review, we were guided by the principle of moral governance as espoused by the government of the day. This is the framework of governance, which conveys a strong and appealing message that the BARMM, under the leadership of the MILF, will run an ethical, moral, and honest government. Ordinary people in the community can readily comprehend its meaning based on their own Islamic values and teachings of what is right and wrong. Attorney Hanan will present the key accomplishments.
Okay, Attorney Hanan.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I am honored to present to you the key accomplishments of the Bangsamoro government during this transition period. So these key accomplishments are based on the priority task as mandated by the Bangsamoro Organic Law. So next slide, please, Madam.
Yeah.
Okay, the first major accomplishment is the organization of the Bangsamoro Authority. It is composed of 80 members, who were all appointed by President Duterte and led by the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, without prejudice to the participation of the Moro National Liberation Front. The BTA serves as the interim government in the BARMM during this transition period. Along with the organization of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, President Duterte also appointed the interim chief minister in the person of Ahod Balawag Ibrahim. Number three major accomplishment during this transition period is the approval of the BTA parliamentary rules and procedures. So this was the first order of business of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament to pass the resolution number 6, which is the resolution providing for the parliamentary rules, procedures and practices of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, which provided for the legislative procedures in the conduct of all sessions, committee hearings, and meetings and other similar activities in the BTA. The rules aim to ascertain the will of the majority, the preservation of the rights of the minority, and to facilitate the orderly conduct of business in the BTA. Okay, number four major accomplishment is the organization of the bureaucracy in the BTA. Now, this goes the approval of the enhanced transition plan, which was submitted to the interim chief minister and duly approved by the parliament. Now, this transition plan is the structural framework of the BARMM. This is the guiding principle and policies for the BTA and provides descriptions for the institutional linkages and mechanisms for the transition. These also included a general timeline of the activities and the ministry or offices responsible for each activity. The under the organization of the bureau also is the gradual phasing out of the armed personnel. Now, under this, there were already 3,997 employees, plantilla employees, who were already separated from the BARMM. Now, separation incentives in the amount of 4.1 billion were released to the 3,902 employees. The release of these separation incentives took place between December 2019 and May 2020. And under the organization also is the approval of the placement process for hiring of employees during the transition period, the launching of the Bangsamoro job portal. The details of this will be discussed in our report, which will be furnished to all of you. The creation of the important offices and institution in the BARMM. This will include the Human Rights Commission, the Attorney General's Office, the Socio-Economic Development Planning System, the Bangsamoro Women Commission, Youth Commission, and Sports Commission. Okay, another major accomplishment is the enactment of the Bangsamoro Appropriation Act. Now, this Bangsamoro Appropriation Act is the watershed accomplishment of the BTA, because under this Bangsamoro Appropriation Acts, the transition government were able to legislate or enact a law catering to the needs of the Bangsamoro people. Now, you will note in the slide that there was a significant increase of the budget of these ministries in the Bangsamoro government now. Like, for example, this budget of the DILG from 169 million to 1.3 billion. Like it is not stated here, but the budget for cultural minorities or the IPs increased by 400% from 27 million to more or less 99 million, significant increase in their budget. Number 6 accomplishment is the release of the internal revenue allotment. Now, previously, there were 11 municipalities which did not receive their IRA, but during the enactment of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority or the Bangsamoro government, 11 municipalities that were previously not entitled to IRA finally received their share. These municipalities include Dato Salibo, Dato Hofer, Mangudadatu, Pandag, Northern Kabuntalan, Dato Blas Sinswat, and Dato Angal Mitibang in Maguindanao. And in Basilan, these municipalities are Akbar, Albarca, Haji Muhtamad, and Muhammad Ajul. All these municipalities finally received their IRA effective January or February 2020. Transfer full powers and properties of the arm to the Bangsamoro government. Now, sometime last February 26, 2019, the arm, through its then regional governor Mujib Hataman, was officially turned over to the Bangsamoro Authority through the interim chief minister Ahud Ibrahim. Partially, this is one of the most important, no, the partial enactment of the priority legislation. Now, as of yesterday, we are aware that the Bangsamoro Administrative Code has finally been enacted by the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. Now, as of now, there are two codes which are pending before the Parliament. These are the Local Governance Code and the Civil Service Code. On the other hand, the Education Code is already approved at the cabinet level and is already ready for filing to the Parliament. The Electoral Code is expected to be filed before the end of this year. As to the revenue code, it is still under the technical working group. So they are still preparing for the revenue code. Number 9 is the enactment of law to recognize, promote, and preserve rights of indigenous peoples. Now, the non-Moro members of the parliament already prepared a bill for this, and it has already passed to first reading, but it was halted because of this pandemic, and now they will, or when the session resumes, they will continue with this law or bill for the indigenous peoples. Number 10 is the parliamentary districts for the first electives were determined already at the cabinet level. So the parliamentary districts will be incorporated in the electoral code in as much as this is election related. So this matter will require massive consultations at the community level and among political clans and local governments. So initially there were 32 identified legislative districts in the Bangsamoro area. But I think this is not yet final. Turnover of 63 barangays, new areas of the Bangsamoro. Last plebiscite, there were 63 barangays in North Cotabato which voted to join the Bangsamoro Authority. So last year, through the acting governor Lala Mendoza, these 63 barangays were turned over to the Bangsamoro government as represented by interim chief minister Ahud Ibrahim. Number 12, this is the constitution of the intergovernmental relations. So for the national government side, there were 10 representatives, and which is headed by the Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez. And on the Bangsamoro government, there are also 10 representatives headed by Minister Mohagir Ekbal. Now, the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process serves as the joint secretariat for this. So this is quite long. The discussions of this accomplishment is quite long, and you will see the details of this in our formal report. So these are just, you can just go through it, but the details of it is in the formal report. Okay. And then this one is also one of the significant accomplishment of the BARMM, which they have shown self-reliance in combating pandemic. So through its READY, the TABANG, the AMBAG, these are all the mechanisms used by the BARMM to to help the affected Moro and non-Moro within the Bangsamoro territory. So I think this is the highlights of their accomplishments during the transition period. So you can read all of this in the formal report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Hanan. So
Thank
may
you.
we now call on Attorney Marian Arnado to give us more insights into this midterm review.
Thank you. Now, let me present to you the gaps and challenges. Now, I just want to clarify that this midterm review is not a performance evaluation of the BA. We are not we're not evaluating their performance. Mainly, we are checking on their progress and the implementation of their priority task, given that there are specific timelines that are provided for in the Bangsamoro Organic Law, wherein they will have to operate. So we basically we are just checking how far they have already accomplished this priority task and functions. Now, next slide, please. It is very important that when we talk about gaps and when we talk about gaps and challenges, we are primarily referring to those specific tasks and priorities which are required by law to be accomplished by the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. So that covers the parameters of the review. Now, second, it is very important to consider that this whole transition is not just at the level of the ARMM to the BARMM. It is not just happening within the autonomous region. What is in transition now is not just BTA. Both national government and the BARMM are actually in transition. Second, it is also important to understand the context of and complexity of the transition period, considering that this is a product of a long years of negotiation, and it is being led by a revolutionary government that has been fighting government in the last 40 years. So there's a lot of transition that is not only happening at the structural level, but even psychologically and personally among the different actors in the BTA. So it is important also to look at this as we go through, as we proceed in the reviewing the progress of the transition. The third is that when we look at the transition, there are actually two levels. One is the transition from the AMM to the BARMM, which has already been accomplished so far with the turnover of powers and functions by the defunct ARMM to the BTA as of February 26, 2019. So that is already accomplished. And then from there, the rigors of transition, the preparation for the establishment of the regular Bangsamoro government set in, which is actually the second level or second stage of transition, where this is still at this point laden with so many challenges. Now, in terms of gaps, we have observed that the transfer of powers of the ARMM to the BARMM lacks the participation of the interagency committee. So under the law, Article 16, Section 10, an interagency committee had to be headed by the Office of the President and composed of the DBM, COA, and Civil Service, should have conducted the requisite inventory prior to the turnover so that to ensure that the liabilities of the ARMM under law, contracts, or obligations shall be assumed by the national government. So we have observed that this was not followed. the interagency committee was not formed up to now, and so that the turnover was just between the ARMM and the BTA, represented by the Office of the Chief Minister. Now, uh, the purpose of the law, the wisdom of the legislator in requiring the participation of the interagency committee is supposedly to give the BARMM a clean slate, so that it will not be necessarily burdened with the obligations of the arm, which under the law should have been assumed by the national government. So that's one gap. Next, please. Now, another area that need to be addressed during the transition is that there is a provision under the BOL that within 1 year from the ratification of the organic law, the properties, real properties owned, the real properties owned by the ARMM but located outside of its jurisdiction shall be purchased by the national government, and the proceeds thereof to be remitted to the BARMM. Now, the timeline here under the law is supposed to be within 1 year from the ratification, but as of now, per our review, this is not yet accomplished. Well, the next gap, which I think is very obvious, and because it's right there in Cotabato City, where the seat of the Autonomous Region is located. So obviously, Cotabato City at this point has not yet been turned over. And we all know that last January 21, 2019, the affirmative votes won in the plebiscite with 36,682 votes. But as of the midterm review, the Cotabato City has not yet been turned over, and then the DILG regional office in Cotabato City has not also been turned over to its counterpart agency in the BARMM, which is the Ministry of Interior Local Government. So this remains as a gap, and under the law, this should have been done immediately upon the proclamation of the results of the plebiscite by the COMELEC. So this should have been done as early as January 21, 2019, but up to now, that remains as a gap. The transfer by the DENR of the management and protection of nature reserves and aquatic parks, forests, watersheds, reservations, and other protected areas within the BARMM has not yet been done. So under the law, BOL, Article 13, Section 9, this should have been done within 3 months from the establishment of the BTA. Well, you will see here that this particular turnover is lodged at the level of the national government, at the level of the DNR. So this requires the conduct of surveys of all affected areas and then planning and transition for each of the protected area. So that remains as a gap up to now. Creation of the ad hoc joint body to establish the coordinates of the zones of joint cooperation in the Sulu Sea and Moro Gulf. Now, we are aware that under the BOL, there is supposed to be a zones of joint cooperation in the Sulu Sea and Moro Gulf to jointly manage and utilize and exploit the mineral resources, natural resources that will be found within that area. Now, under the law, it specifically requires the creation of the joint ad hoc body within 30 days from the ratification of the BOL. So 30 days is actually, from ratification, is this should have been accomplished as early as February 2019. But we are also aware that by that time, at that time, there was no BTA yet. No, BTA was only formally inaugurated last March 29, 2019. So this particular task under the BOL up to now has not yet been accomplished. And they are still at the level of constituting who will be the representatives of the national government and the Bangsamoro government in the ad hoc joint body so that they can finally proceed with the survey. Later, you will see that this particular gap has a bearing in the finalization of the revenue code. Now, out of the 6 priority legislation that were assigned to be accomplished by the BTA, it is only the revenue code that has not yet fully developed its draft. No, the draft is still at the level of the technical working group, and there are several constraints that were identified why they were not able to fully come up with a draft yet. No, so for example, one of the reasons there is that there is still a need to determine the territorial jurisdiction of the Bangsamoro government, because it will have bearing in the determination of the taxing authority or jurisdiction of the BARMM. So for example, within that, they need to finalize the coordinates of the Bangsamoro waters, because from there they will be able to determine which area falls within the municipal waters, which area falls into the provincial, and beyond that will already be the regional waters, will be the coverage of the taxing jurisdiction of the autonomous region. So this will have application later when you see, for example, fishing vessels operating within the Bangsamoro waters. Here, there are technicalities required here so that they will know to whom they will pay taxes, whether it will be at the municipal, provincial, or at the level of the regional. All this will have to be determined, established, and finalized by the NAMRIA through the Bangsamoro water map. Okay. Now, turnover of regional offices to BARMM has not yet been done. We are aware that there are already expanded powers. These are the expanded powers that are already devolved to the autonomous region under the law. So there are so many powers enumerated in the BOL that were supposed to be transferred or already vested in the ARMM. And with that particular devolution, it requires the turnover by the national government of agencies, offices, and GOCCs located within the new autonomous region, so that the transfer will already be completed. So for example, the Department of Agriculture need to turn over to its counterpart agency in the BARMM. Department of Agrarian Reform also need to turn over. DepEd, they have several schools in Cotabato City and its 63 barangays that need to be turned over to be transferred to the MBHTE. This is the Ministry of Basic, Higher, and Technical Education. For example, CAAP, this is the, under CAAP, there are 3 airports: the Awang Airport, the Sanga Airport, and Holo Airport. All these need to turn over to the BARMM insofar as the ground operation is concerned. So DOLE, for instance, also need to turn over regional offices, including their POEA and OWA, NLRC counterparts. So there are so many things that there are so many offices and agencies that need to be turned over. And under the BOL, all these need to be transferred. The transfer shall be within 3 months from the ratification of the BOL. So if you strictly follow the law, that should have been done last year in May or June. So you will see in the report that this the discussion, negotiation, planning at the level of the national government and their counterpart agencies in the BARMM are still ongoing at varying levels. So, it's really taking a lot of time to do this because there are so many agencies involved. For example, DA. DA alone, there are so many offices under DA. The National Food Authority is under this. Philippine Coconut Authority is under DA. And so, each of these offices need to turn over, and it's really taking a lot of time. And obviously, the 3-month timeline provided in the BOL is not actually realistic. Next, please. Now, the transfer of properties and assets of national government. So aside from the turnover of personnel and offices of the national government to the BARMM, as mentioned in the earlier slides, under the law, within 3 months from ratification, the national government is also required to transfer the properties and assets of national government agencies to BARMM. So as of the review, again, this particular task has not yet been accomplished. There are buildings, properties, offices that are involved here. And as of now, meetings and negotiations and exchange of papers are being done between these offices, but none of these agencies have fully completed the transfer yet. So in other words, everything is still ongoing. Under the law, there is also a provision that the Al Amana Islamic Bank and the Southern Philippines Development Authority should allow the participation of the BARMM in its operations. But again, per our review, this should have been done within 6 months from the establishment of the BTA. As of review now, this remains as a gap yet. Next, we will now go to the fiscal challenges of the transition. We are aware that under the law, the Bangsamoro, the BARMM will have a block grant mechanism as an expression of its fiscal autonomy. Now, per our review, we have observed that at the onset of transition, when they assumed office in the turnover was done February 26, 2019. The BTA was inaugurated March 29, 2019. And at the time when they started with their office, when they assumed office, we observed that there was no funds, there was no dedicated fund intended to finance the task and priorities of the BTA in the transition period. What they inherited were the funds of the ARMM in the 2019 budget, which already have specific programs and projects already planned and approved as early as 2018 during the congressional hearing of the budget. So you will notice that BTA, in terms of operation, BTA actually utilize or if you say they wasted actually 2019, they wasted the 2019 time to implement projects of the ARMM when they're supposed to already focus on their priority tasks. But considering that they are tied to the approved budget, which have little flexibility because these are already line budget items, then the gaps are then the budget is they ended up implementing the ARM budget. In other words, we have also observed that under the law there should be 5 billion pesos per year to be as the social development fund, which is intended for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the communities and the normalization process. So if you look at the law, 5 billion should have been released in 2019, and then another 5 billion for this year, 2020, for the next 10 years to cover the much needed reconstruction and rehabilitation efforts. But per our review, this 5 billion, this social development fund was not released in 2019. And as of this year, we were informed very lately that the amount of 2.5 has already been released to their treasury as of October. No? So that means that if you look at, strictly speaking, the allocation for the Social Development Fund, there is a shortfall of 7.5 billion if you follow the provision of the BOL. Now, under the law, there is also a provision under Article 12, Section 23, that the national government will provide additional funds for development programs and intended for infrastructures and expenditures for development projects. The actual amount and manner of release must be determined and immediately decided by the Intergovernmental Relations Board, so that fresh funds for development and infrastructure will come in. Again, this particular amount has not yet been released to the BARMM. Now, the block grant is actually the main expression, supposedly, of the fiscal autonomy of the BARMM. And under the law, it states that the release of the annual block grant should be done directly and comprehensively to the Bangsamoro government without need of further action. So if you look at the current flow of the releases of the block grant, that flow chart will show you the current flow. From the DBM, it goes to the Bangsamoro Treasury Central Office. From there, it goes to the Bureau of Treasury of Region 12. Then it goes through the Mindanao Province Treasury, until it finally reaches the BARMM Treasury. So if you look at that particular flow, you will actually see that the release of block grant is not direct. In fact, it is even circuitous. It is not also comprehensive because it is subject to the monthly cash allocation. So it actually follows a 1/12 formula of releasing, which is a practice of the national government. But if you look at the specific requirements of standards of comprehensive and direct, I think this need to be reviewed revisited again by the DBM and the BARMM. Another thing is that it is also important to look at the participation of the BARMM in the determination of the 5% net share in the national internal revenue collection, because this is the basis of the block grant. Now, this is being done at the level of the national office, national government, but we are also, it will also be ideal for purposes of transparency if the BARMM will have a representation there, so that they will be able to check also the accuracy of the 5% net share determination by the national government. Another main challenge that I think is readily admitted by our BTA, by our key informants, is that on the human capital aspect, or the human resources. Now, we have admittedly, there is lack of experience in governance and lack of understanding on the parliamentary system of government. I think this is, insofar as the parliamentary system of government, there is no model within the country that is already operating. This is novel insofar as the Bangsamoro government is concerned. And so there's a lot of adjustment that need to be done to be able to really have a good grasp on the workings and operations of a parliamentary system. Another is the lack of experience in governance. Admittedly, our leaders in the BTA now, the members in the BTA, 41% of them are long-time revolutionaries. And according to one of our informants, Sami Gambal, he said that they were trained in the last 40 years to fight government. That was their main training. And they were trained kung paano nila pabagsakin yung gobyerno. Wala na silang inisip at wala na silang nakitang maganda sa government. And suddenly, they are now the ones in government. So there's a lot of adjustment there in terms of learning curve and capacity. No, the another one is the lack of personnel, which is also related to the current hiring of in the job portal. Now, the job portal is actually a good system because it provides for a merit-based and standardized process of hiring. But based on our midterm review, we have noted that there are 295,813 applications in the job portal, which only requires 4,094 positions. So for the 4,094 positions, there are more than 200,000 applicants. And the processing of these applications already takes a lot of time. This proved to be a logistical nightmare for concerned ministries who did not expect such a huge volume of application. For the Office of the Chief Minister alone, which has which posted 150 vacant positions in the job portal, there were 22,000 applicants. And with this, from January to September, they have only finished processing the 10 positions. So as you will see, this is taking a lot of time. This might even eat up the remaining months of the transition period if they will not be able to fast track or adjust this process. And you will see later that this will have bearing on the actual implementation of peace dividends and tangible projects at the community level, because there are very few people who will be tapped to implement the projects. Next, please. lack of consultations and consensus building in the drafting of IP law. I think there's a lot of constraint here since there's also the pandemic and the consultations of especially for IP communities are usually based on cultural practices which are very at the community level and face-to-face, very massive. It's really community consultation type. And so this is considering that there is a pandemic and there are restrictions in face-to-face meetings. This has become problematic insofar as the drafting of the IP law is concerned because of the nature of the consultation with indigenous peoples. And then another challenge here is the need for a legal definition of who are the indigenous peoples in the BARMM in relation to the specific nomenclature of non-Moro indigenous peoples within the BOL itself. Because this will have actual bearing later when we talk about, for example, if you look at indigenous peoples based on our own working definition in the IPRA, all of the Moro people are actually indigenous peoples. Maranaos will claim they are indigenous, the Tausugs, the Yakan, the Sama, the Iranun, Maguindanao, they will also fall under the definition of indigenous peoples. And so there is a need within the context of the BARMM to define who are the indigenous peoples in the larger Bangsamoro society that need to be protected and developed as part of the Bangsamoro. So this is a big challenge now, and I think the discussion with regards to this are ongoing at the level of the IP representatives in the BTA. And then there is also the burden of demonstrating that the BARMM will be able to enact a law that will be more effective and much more improved than the IPRA, because that's actually the one of the arguments in the negotiations and in the deliberation in Congress, wherein MILF claimed that they will be able to enact a more effective law that will be that is much more improved than IPRA. So they claim at that time that they will do that, and this is now the time during the transition to be able to demonstrate it by coming up with an IP law that will really provide concrete protection and guarantee the preservation of the ancestral domain territories of the IPs. What is a good start now at this point is that in terms of budgeting, the budget for the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples has actually increased by 400%. From 23 million, it has significantly increased to 99 million. So that's a good start, no, in terms of putting the priorities, putting these priorities in the budget itself. The period of transition, as you will see, excuse me, sorry. Wait. Now, the period of transition actually starts from the ratification of the BOL, January 25, 2019, and will end with the qualification of the first Chief Minister of the Parliament on June 30, 2022, which covers a period of 1,265 days. Today is the 645th day of the transition, with remaining 620 days. And so if you look at that timeline, and we also know that October next year, so we are is already the filing of candidacy of the candidates for the election at all levels, no, from local, regional, up to national level. So if you look at this period, there is really the midterm review consider this as a very big challenge on how to accomplish everything given the remaining time, because we all know that once we start with the 2021 next year, it will really be an election year. And so if we require the members of the BTA and even the MILF to really prepare for the election, then the important task of implementing and putting in place and completing the transition period task might be affected. Based on our interviews with key informants and including the FGDs, there is a strong call for the extension of the period of transition. And one of the early proponents of this particular call is the Sangguniang Panlalawigan of Mindanao. As early as 2019, they already proposed for the extension of the period, considering that the 3 years is really very short at the time. Now, the League of Mayors of Tawi-Tawi also just this year issued a resolution calling for the extension and including the Provincial Board of Tawi-Tawi. Now, even in our discussion with the focus group discussion, this particular call came out consistently from across sectors and political persuasion. Now, we have noted that in terms of the transition period is actually, and the calls for extension is actually complicated with the COVID-19 pandemic, because we are actually practically in a state of paralysis insofar as the operation of the government is concerned. Everyone is like what we are doing now. We are just here on the Zoom, so it's very limiting. No, the pandemic is really giving us unprecedented challenges, and so the BTA is actually robbed of the entire year of 2020 to implement the transition. And if you recall earlier, we have also said that in the 2019 was practically implemented, was practically utilized to implement the programs and projects of the ARMM in the GAA. So 2019 was also was not also fully utilized and maximized to implement the transition. And so and then as of now, sessions at the Parliament are on and off. From March to May, it was suspended due to lockdown. Some sessions were done in August, some in September. The other day, there was a plenary session wherein they finally approved the administrative code. But these are all abnormal times. And even as we are talking now, we do not know what will happen in the coming months. And so these are some of the basis why there is a call to extend the transition period so that kung baga sa Bisaya pa, kung naaman tay giluto, dili mahilaw, no? Kay kung mahilaw ang atong giluto, dili na nato makaon. So murag inana, no? That's the analogy. So we should give this process the fullest time to be able to realize its targets, so that we will really be able to completely enjoy the dividends of peace here in Mindanao. What remains to be done? This is just a very fast rundown of what I have already mentioned to you. The transfer of and turnover of national government agencies to the BARMM, including their properties and assets. the turnover of Cotabato City to the BARMM. Cotabato is just right at the nose of the BARMM, but as you will see, it is facing a lot of challenges in terms of turnover. Purchased by the national government of the properties and building structures of that owned by the ARMM but are located outside of the BARMM. This should be purchased by the national government so that the proceeds thereof will be turned over as additional funds to the BARMM. Transfer of the DNR of the management, I have already discussed that. Convening of the ad hoc joint body, I have discussed that also. This one, convening of the interagency committee, we are strongly recommending that this will be also done, even if the turnover was already done last year, but this can be part of the catch-up. Completion and enactment of the, well, we have already the administrative code. They said that what will follow will be the local governance and the civil service. The education code has already been filed the other day. So that is already in the parliament. Finalization of the parliamentary districts and hiring of personnel to fill in the bureaucracy. Enactment of the IP law, we have already discussed this. And then the creation of the Office of the Settler Communities is already done. By the way, this is just an update. This has already been deemed created with the passage of the administrative code, which include there the Office of the Settler Communities, and of course, the delivery of the much-needed peace dividend. I think this is really at the much-awaited dividend coming from to the communities, and I think Melot will discuss that in detail in her next presentation. So thank you very much. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Attorney Arenado. It was such a very enlightening presentation. Now we go back to our presenter, Ma'am Melot, who will be answering the question, where is my peace dividend?
Okay. Mayong buntag again. When we talk of peace dividend, there is a common definition. Peace dividend is understood as a portion of funds made available for non-defense spending by a reduction in the defense budget. Like after mahuman na ang gera, no? Like after a war. When we did the focus group discussions, the participants' understanding of the peace dividend is this. The budget for war can now be utilized for developing or reconstructing the destroyed or underdeveloped economy, build the destroyed houses, construct and repair roads and bridges, spend for education, finance social services, build schools, hospitals, rural health centers, also training centers for livelihood or for improvement of science and technology. So, peace dividend cannot be understated. After the cessation of hostilities or war, that peace dividend becomes the lifeblood of the long-suffering Bangsamoro people. So this is already mentioned earlier, 21 focus group discussions in the BARMM areas or provinces and cities. We asked 5 common questions across the 21 focus group discussion. So first is, we asked them to revisit their hopes or the benefits they expect from the BARMM. Then we asked them about the accomplishments, what they know of the accomplishments of the interim government that have benefited them. Third is, we asked them, as far as they knew, about the challenges or difficulties encountered by the BARMM, as these affect the fulfillment of their hopes or dreams and aspirations. And fourth, we asked them also what their community or sector can do to assist the new government to fulfill its mandate and fulfill its promise of peace dividends. And lastly, we ask them how satisfied are they with the performance of the Bangsamoro government. Okay, for the first question, we just translated this from the local language, loosely translated to English. Okay. On top of the list of expectations is peace, lasting peace and security, the end of all kinds of armed conflicts, including RIDO or family feuds, land grabbing, and all other causes of armed conflicts. When peace reigns, the realization of the people's all other expectation will follow. They believed that when there is peace, development follows. Next to peace is the improvement in their living condition. As they understood this, it means economic security, access to jobs and gainful employment, support for small and medium entrepreneurial activities, and sustainable livelihood. Also support for capital, production inputs, tools and equipment, and technology to increase their productivity. All parents want their children to have education that is free, scholarships especially for the orphaned children whose parents perished in the war, children of the IPs and solo parents, and children of the combatants. This also shows that they essentially put on the Bangsamoro government the future of their children. Particularly mentioned are the out-of-school youth, to bring them back to school or for them to be engaged in productive work so that the probability of the recruitment by violent extremist groups will be prevented. The wide-ranging role of the madrasa schools is equally given importance in shaping the potentials of the Bangsamoro children and youth. Some more of their hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Okay. Along with education is their wish to live a healthy life, emphasizing that the government must attend to the needs of the poor and disadvantaged, that they would have access to free healthcare services and improved healthcare institutions, particularly those in the far-flung areas. And ancestral domain, self-governance, social justice, and cultural integrity are the indigenous people's long-time aspirations. So what have they received so far? Oh, sorry. So when we asked them about the peace dividends they have received or they knew others have received, here are some of their answers. Across all FGDs, peace and ayuda or assistance are mentioned repeatedly. For the Tedurais in South UP who evacuated in 1970s, some of them have returned to their ancestral domains. Around Boldon Barira area, their lives have become peaceful when RIDO and other armed conflicts stopped. The decommissioning of the MILF combatants demonstrated the end of armed conflict with the government. This made the local residents to be able to walk around their place, not being scared anymore. With the start of decommissioning, the former combatants have received livelihood programs. There's peace in South UP when the BARMM government, LGU, and AFP facilitated the surrender of some lawless elements together with their firearms. Similarly, land conflict mediation in North UP brought peace in the area. Some more peace dividends received. Sorry. Okay, the term ayuda becomes a buzzword among the Bangsamoro households. The local people are grateful for the food packs and hygiene kits, good for 1 to 2 weeks consumption. Ayuda in terms of cash work, financial assistance for the poor and disadvantaged. Ayuda in the form of infrastructure like repair and or construction of farm to market road, road widening, construction of new roads. Farmers and fisher folks are recipients of production inputs. The hostages benefited from the job opportunities. Those who can teach English and Arabic are now given proper compensation. Some madrasa schools are given some degree of physical improvement. The Ministry of Education's licensure exam for teachers review program is given free for the reviewees. Salaries of some teachers reportedly increased, while the probationary teachers are given the opportunity to get regular positions once they would pass the LET. Scholarships are given to the youth, including the children of the Mujahideen. The release of the era gives the LGU a feeling of euphoria that they are now co-equal with the rest of the LGUs in the country. Lastly, they think the BARMM government tries its best to be participative, that the leaders are sincere and credible and serious in eradicating corruption. Now, there are issues and comments that we have about the BARMM or the interim government. So, statements like BARMM is good, but no unity in the BTA. Transition period is too short, not enough. Not passed any law, but as of yesterday, we have the administrative code. There's law in crafting the laws. Small businesses or enterprises are ignored. This is according to the business sector who participated in the focus group discussions. Political committees not coordinating properly. The MILF is not ready to handle the government or running the government, and that only MILF families were given assistance. The COVID-19 pandemic slows down its work, lack of information dissemination, lack of proper monitoring in the assistance provided, and there's the exclusive leadership, as they said. There is difficulty to adjust from being a revolutionary to being in the seat of government. There is delayed enactment of priority bills that's mentioned earlier. There is bias in terms of leadership positions because most of them are Magindanaoans. The projects initiated for the youth have not reached the grassroots. Policies were not in line with the desires of the youth and inappropriate in the area and culture. No proper execution and delivery of services, no equal opportunities to non-Muslims, the removal of provisionary teachers without consulting those who were affected. Small businesses, enterprises are ignored. BTA should hold public hearings and listen to the people. Delay in enactment, that's already passed. There's continuing land conflict, the killing of IP leaders, the problem in Sulu as to peace and order has not been solved yet. The BARMM should focus on the agricultural sector. The corrupt are not made accountable for their actions. How about us, the settler communities? Are we part of BARMM? Lack of information dissemination as to its accomplishments. We also asked them, so in what way that their sector or their community can help the BARMM government to deliver the peace dividend. And they said they need certain attitudes. Certain attitudes are required of them to be able to assist the Bangsamoro government to fulfill its mandate to deliver the promised peace dividend. But it entails a lot of their personal and collective fortitude to act as partners of the Bangsamoro government. They are the governed and as well part of the government. They said that they will be the source of inspiration. They will instill self-discipline, be self-reliant, optimistic, law-abiding, and resilient amidst the many hurdles they would experience along in the journey towards claiming their peace dividend. They have to show kindness and patience in partnering with the government. They have to guarantee the government with their utmost cooperation. They said that the Bangsamoro government will be dealing with an actively engaged citizenry. And lastly, we asked them how satisfied are they with the performance of the BARMM government during the midterm transition. So if you look at the extreme ratings, the fully not satisfied and the not satisfied, the fully not satisfied and the fully satisfied, you have 6.5% out of the 232. Those who are fully satisfied, that's 15.1%. If you combine these two, fully not satisfied and not satisfied, this would be around almost one third, like 31%. And this one, if we combine the two, this would be around 49% something or half of the 232 focus group discussion participants. So there are more, in other words, there are more FGD participants who are satisfied and fully satisfied compared to those who are not fully satisfied or not satisfied. But we have also to take note that there are almost 20% who did not give an answer or they refused to rate their satisfaction. It would be instructive to the BARMM government to look into these perceptions and validate their perceptions. Now we have 12 recommendations. I will proceed na diretso for the 12 recommendations. The first recommendation is to extend the period of transition for another 3 years. This would grant both national government and the Bangsamoro Transition Authority sufficient time to fully accomplish their priority tasks and duties, especially those that need to be jointly implemented with national government counterparts and in due regard with the difficult demands of the normalization process and the larger context of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro implementation. That's our first recommendation. Our second recommendation is to accelerate the drafting and final enactment of the local governance code, education code, civil code, and the rest of the codes, and set actual schedules and timeline, their passage and approval without sacrificing the democratic requirements for consultations and consensus building among the Moro leaders, constituents, and stakeholders. Third recommendation is to institutionalize moral governance by creating an independent anti-corruption office that reports directly to the Bangsamoro Parliament with comprehensive policies, strategies, and mechanisms for implementation, monitoring, and accountability. Our fourth recommendation is to expedite hiring of personnel and explore other recruitment modalities, especially for those ministries, offices, and special projects concerned with the implementation of tangible projects and the delivery of basic services for communities and target beneficiaries. Recruit In line with our recommendation number 4 is to recruit consultants and experts for urgent tasks that require specialized trainings, competence, experience, highly technical and scientific knowledge and know-how. Along with this is to consider the call of the Bangsamoro professionals, returning scholars, and the academic institutions in the Bangsamoro provinces and cities to open opportunities for them to serve the immediate needs and the deliverables of the BTA. This portion ay malalim yung hugot ng mga MSU Mindanao State University system kasi they are not being tapped na daw ngayon. Unlike before when they were still campaigning for the passage of the BOL. Okay, our recommendation number 5 is to develop and implement a strategic focused set of learning and development interventions that will build on the current organizational capacities and competencies of the interim government. Recommendation number 6, encourage international financial aid and donor support for the transition period and set up the Bangsamoro Normalization Trust Fund through the speedy issuance of the Special Presidential Authority. Recommendation number 7 is to convene the Inter-Agency Committee to implement the conduct of requisite inventory to ensure that the liabilities of the arm under law, contracts, or obligations will be assumed by the national government. Recommendation number 8 is to immediately release the amount of the 10 billion pesos to the Bangsamoro Treasury to cover the required annual 5 billion pesos releases for the years 2019 and 2020 respectively. Adopt guidelines like the BARMM and the DBM joint memorandum, which shall provide for the date and manner of release of the Special Development Fund. Recommendation number 9 is to review and improve the manner of release of the annual block grant to make it consistent with the fiscal autonomy standards for direct and comprehensive release. Increase transparency and representation of BARMM in the determination of the 5% net annual internal revenue tax collection of the BIR and the Bureau of Customs to determine the accuracy thereof. Our 10th recommendation is to address the high expectations of the people and deliver the peace dividends. These are scholarships, employment, livelihood, farming inputs, tools and equipment, capitalization, housing, and many others, as quickly as possible and on a massive scale to create real and visible changes on the ground. This can be pursued in partnership with local civil societies, NGOs, POs, cooperatives, and the Social Welfare Committee. Our 11th recommendation is to set up formal mechanisms that will strengthen and concretize the participation and involvement of non-Moro indigenous peoples in the drafting of laws and policies, planning and implementation of specific IP provisions in the BOL intended for their protection. This includes the delivery of development projects subject to their free and prior informed consent and to exert programmatic efforts to promote unity and solidarity between and among their ranks. And lastly, our recommendation is to have a good strategic communication plan. Consider the audience, messages, and the appropriate channels of communication. More so, strike a balance between social media and the cultural forms of information exchange, which are more practical and effective in remote areas with no access to internet. This is in particular to the Bangsamoro communities. Many of those who joined in the focus group discussions are not aware of what's going on with the BARMM. Magsukol, maraming salamat, daghang salamat, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Melot. That ends our presentation of the midterm review of the Bangsamoro Transition, the legal and political track. But we already have some questions here, and I would like to read them. From Pat Serenas of MinCode, who is the main person in the cabinet who is supposed to bring attention to the gaps and urgent challenges so that action can be undertaken immediately? Is it the PAP? May clout ba siya sa cabinet? The PAP is the peace advisor, yeah. So who will answer?
Where is Mary Ann? Mary Ann.
Mary Ann will answer the question.
Attorney Arnado will answer that question.
Yeah.
Okay, Pat. Kadali lang ha. Okay. Well, I think the implementation of the gaps and all these challenges that are still being that we are still facing lies really at the level of the highest official of the country, because it's not just on a ministry or agency level, because there's really a need for the president to have a full hand in the transition so that he can really check on the gaps and problems. And I think, for example, in the current issue on the Cotabato City, I think he is handling that situation. And so that's really the level that is needed so that we are able to fully address and correct if there are any problems along the way in the transition.
We have another question from Jamil Alim, chair of the Consortium of Bangsamoro Civil Society. And the question is, the expectation from the BTA to distinguish between transition and long-term regular government. Who wants to answer that question?
Mary Ann also.
What's the question? Sorry, what's the question?
The expectation of the BTA, how is it going to distinguish between transition, kay BTA man, and the long-term regular government?
Excuse me, the question is
okay.
complete. Can I?
Sure,
Giamel,
go ahead,
please.
Hi, Giamel.
Yes.
Hi, Giamel.
Yes, Melot and everyone there. Doon sa question on hopes and dreams, ang tinanong kasi is, what are your hopes and dreams sa BARMM? And if you talk of the BARMM, you are talking about this long-term regular BARMM government.
Yes.
I think we are looking at assessing the BTA. And therefore, the question should be, what do you expect, hopes and dreams, within the transition of 3 years? So you will get a lot of expectation because people are thinking of long-term.
Yes, that's
so
true.
medyo, yun lang ang tanong ko. There is a need to distinguish expectations, dreams, and hopes sa transition. Kasi transition lang yun siya. Kaysa BARMM, which is long-term. So I think the question should have been that way. I'm sorry if I,
Yeah, you're also right, Giamel. You're right. We asked them their hopes and aspirations na pangkalahatan. And then when we ask them, what have you received during the transition? Siyempre magkaiba yung dalawa. Pero what is more important yata dito is, ano yung perception nila ngayon during the transition period? Ano yung kanilang mga natanggap? In what ways na makakatulong sila sa interim government?
Alam
I
mo,
think,
Melot, if you ask me that question, generic on BARMM, sabihin ko sa iyo, isa sa mga hopes ko sa BARMM ay magkaroon ng connectivity straight from Cotabato City to Jolo via airplanes. And we know that within the transition, that's not possible.
that's right. Yes, oo. So the question should have been, what did you hope to benefit from the interim government or from the transition period?
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's unfortunately we didn't ask that way. Admittedly.
Okay, Sir Giamel, are you still going to ask your first question, which was can the deficit or gaps not be undertaken by the regular government? Looking at the bottlenecks, gaps, deficit, who are going to attribute government or regional government on COVID or the peace and security problems?
Well, sasabihin, ano ko na lang, ganito yon. We have identified gaps, bottlenecks, and all those things. Ang gusto kong itanong is, una, hindi ba pwedeng itong mga deficits na ito ay itutuloy lang namin sa regular government? That's number one. Number two is, pag-identify ng gaps and deficit, kanino natin ito i-attribute? National government, BTA, COVID, peace and security, or time? Kasi when we look for whether we extend or postpone the election or not, dapat makita natin saan nanggagaling yung mga gaps na yun. Okay? So yun yung essence ng aking tanong. Sino ba ang pwedeng managot dito? Is it COVID?
Okay.
Is it national government? Or yung nabanggit kasi na merong incompetence and inexperience sa mga government of the day. So sana ano yung gusto natin dito na makita at paano natin ito aayusin?
Okay. Let me respond. Let me respond to that. I think I just want to clarify that we actually what we actually mentioned is lack of experience, but we did not say it's incompetence. So just to clarify that, because these are two different things. And second is lack of experience in so many levels. Even the national government lacks experience in dealing with a parliamentary form of government. They lack experience in implementing the block grant, because these are all new. These are new arrangements between the autonomous region and the national government. So actually both levels are in transition and are also learning on and trying to satisfy and meet the requirements of the organic law. So that's one thing. Second is if you look at the problems, you cannot also just pin down the factor, pin it down on a particular factor. It's a confluence of so many factors put all together, and that's why we are here at this point. So parang, for example, the lack of experience, the difficulty of the difficulty in establishing this parliamentary form of government, and even the mindset of people in the BTA and their own understanding what is supposed to be parliamentary form or not. There's a lot of debates there even on their own understanding of what is parliamentary. Some are even just copying what is already what is actually a unitary practice within the national government. So at this point, the process happening within the BARMM now is actually geared up towards the establishment of a parliamentary form of government, wherein many of us do not have any model or experience within the country. So others even have to look further to look at the other models of neighboring governments. So that's one. Second is, then the third one is, if you look at who will be, who is, if you use the term blame, but I'm not really, I don't want to use the term blame. No, we just attribute where are the pressure points, for example, or where are the difficulties, because we are really we are not yet at the end of the period. We are still in the midterm, so we are just trying to identify where are the shortfall or weakness, pressure points or weakness, so that we can alarm this to be able to really fully take off. So, for example, both I would say that it's actually both the regional government and the national government who should answer for all these gaps, and they should continue the partnership to be able to complete the gap, to close the gap. And so it should not just be it's BTA there, they're now running. Even as civil society, we are I think also accountable to that, because after the signing of the peace agreement, after the inauguration, we seem to have also finished the task. Tapos na kami dyan kasi andyan na ang BTA, andyan na ang BARMM. So if we look at this midterm, there's a lot of challenges. The demands of transition is overwhelming, and this needs the cooperation of everyone, just like how we used to be working all together, cooperating, collaborating to be able to achieve to be able to have the BOL, or even to have a signing of a peace agreement. This must continue. We must all work together and not just leave this in the shoulders of those who are in the BTA or in the national government or OPAP. Everyone, especially us Mindanaoans here in the, we need to take this opportunity to really complete this process. Now, the final comment lang on election, no, if the problem is lack of experience, why don't we elect people who have the experience? Now the question is, what kind of experience are we looking at? No, because if you look at our current breed of politicians, what kind of experience do they have also? So it's really, and we also know that the election will be very uncertain. We know the type of election that we have. And if the changes, the electoral system is not yet ready for the election of the parliamentary form of government, then we will have the same breed of people. We will have the same families who will be overtaking the parliament, and I don't know, it will be a waste. It will be a waste of the long years of negotiations and advocacies that we have all invested. So what we are saying in the review is to give it time, give it much longer time, so that we will not have regrets in the end. We will really be able to exhaust all avenues to be able to ensure that the BTA will succeed. So that's just my take. Thank you.
Yeah, since we're pressed for time, I'd like to get one more question from Mr. Bong Sarmiento of Mindanao, and the question is, why was the 10 billion pesos Special Development Fund not yet released? There's a press release from DBM last year saying that pursuant to the Bangsamoro Organic Law, 70.6 billion is allocated for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Of the amount, 63.6 billion is for the annual block grant, 5 billion is for the Special Development Fund, and 2 billion pesos is for the BARMM's share in the national taxes. I think I would like to answer
Can
that.
Attorney Hanan respond to that? Hanan?
Hello, good morning. Actually, supposedly the special development fund, there's a budget for that for every year for the next 10 years. There is a 5 billion peso budget as special development fund. So as of now, what we have checked from the DBM website, the only figure that was released is the 2.5 billion. I think it was sometime in August of this year. So for last year, there was no 5 billion release as a special development fund. My understanding is that the release of the 5 billion will start from 2019 up to the next 10 years. For the Black Grant, the budget for the BARMM is 63 billion pesos. It was released circuitously. So it ran to different channels before it was finally released to the BARMM, and it was not on a comprehensive basis. As to the share on the the 2 billion share of the BARMM in the IRA, we did not see in the records of the DBM. So what we have there in the final report that you will see is based on the releases of the DBM to the BARMM.